Jordan, what's up? Thanks for joining me.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
For anybody who doesn't know, Jordan and I have known each other for quite a while now, like a few years?
Yeah. Yeah. What is it? Like 4 years at least?
Yeah. And we've been on some fun little trips together. Jordan, he's the co-founder of Wild. He is also the co-founder of Captured Creative. And so during my time at First Light, Jordan and I used to work a lot together doing a lot of fun projects. In particular, I think the last one was Georgia.
Oh, yeah. Fun in the South.
Nothing says southern tree stand hunting like bushwhacking through briar patches, fear of gators and rattlesnakes, and ticks and spiders on your face.
Man, and this is maybe jumping into the weeds on that prematurely, but I was thinking about this the other day. We were told, like, no, don't worry about the snakes. Like they'll be denned up by the time we get down there. The first hunt, 15 minutes into walking, we get a text. Hey, just stepped over a really big one. Like, look out. Okay, perfect. That just set the tone for the whole trip. Thank you very much.
And I think for me, the little back end of content creation, I think what was hilarious is, I don't have a tag, right? We have our hunter that we're filming who has the tag at the time. And Jordan and Taylor, was Taylor on that trip? It was Hunter Rudd.
Hunter, yep.
Yeah. And they have the, job of filming. So I'm just kind of overseeing it on the brand side of things. So really all I did most of the time is carry snacks with me and hang in the tree with snacks.
This is accurate. I think it was the first night, it was like sunset. The light was beautiful. We hadn't seen anything. Our expectations were low, but in the quiet breeze of the trees, I just hear like a silent wrapper starting to peel like 20 feet away from me. And I look over, it's Aleks on the saddle, just going to Snack Town right at prime time, which I appreciate,
It takes a lot to keep this train running. You know what I'm saying? Like,
hey, big engine run hot. You got to keep it fed.
There you go. Shout out to Casey Hawks.
Casey Hawks.
How'd you abbreviate that?
I know. I can't. He's so fast with those. I can't do it.
For any context there, Casey's our friend. We worked with him over at First Light. He's an awesome human being. Another good Captured Creative piece, Huck made on Casey. You can go check that out. But Casey loves to abbreviate everything. And he's also one of the best human beings on this planet.
Absolutely.
So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself for anybody who's unfamiliar with Dialed and a little bit about your guys' backstory.
Yeah. So Dialed started it was like Q2 of 21. Things finally kind of came together. It had been one of those things, Taylor Coleman and myself, who started Capture Creative 10 years ago now, had kind of just been itching for. We love the production thing, but man, like, what's that next challenge? Like, what can we do? We're both bow hunters, from the time that we could even pick up a bow, we've always hunted. So the interest was always there. And through kind of our time in the outdoor industry, had met some pretty cool people. One of them being Scott Bakken, who ended up being the third founder of Dialed. Just decided like, hey, like, we think we can do a lot of these things better, both from, a product front and from a marketing front. So why wouldn't we? Like, there's no use in just constantly talking about this stuff. Like, let's kind of put our money where our mouths are. And that's what we did. It was kind of just one of those, not quite campfire side, starts of a business, but pretty darn close, especially during the pandemic. It was kind of maybe more like a text-based fireside chat was kind of the impetus of how Dial came together. So
explain to me, prior to you guys coming on the scene, kind of the state of the bow sight industry.
Yeah. It is one where product that was out there was fine. It got the job done. Like, at the end of the day, a bow sight is just an aiming reference. Like, that's all you need, a point or multiple points to aim at as you're shooting your bow. But new product I'll take like a half step back. Product design is super important. I mean, it's what makes you want to pick up an item and brag about it. Like, you might not brag about a rusted out 2002 Chevy Impala, but if you have a shiny new Porsche, they both do the same thing. Which one are you more excited to like tell your friends about? Which one are you more excited to use on a daily basis? So that was kind of like the start of it. And then on the marketing side as well, it was not throwing shade at all, but it was like kind of low hanging fruit for us to bring our production capabilities and our digital capabilities to a new brand that we have full control over. For years, we had spent time and effort developing things for other brands, so they could sell products, so they could get in front of people. And we're like, we feel like we can do this pretty well, without anybody over the top of us telling us like, hey, like, don't use this, use this. We're not and that's again, not throwing shade to any client or any partners we've ever worked with, but we just kind of had a really good kind of 10,000 foot view of like, hey, there's a lot of room for improvement in both aspects of this thing. And, it's the long running joke of the hunting industry is a decade behind mainstream. It takes that long for like trends. By the time a trend hits the outdoor industry, it's outdated in Hollywood, it's outdated in New York. We're kind of on the forefront of like, hey, this style video is going right now, this style graphic design, like these ads. And it takes so long. And there's companies that are like, Yeti blew up the space, with films a decade ago. Nobody else is doing it. By the time everybody else caught up, Yeti was like, yeah, we're kind of done with films now, because that's old news. So we knew that with Dialed, we could kind of bring that and get that in front of people, as well as with our engineers, with our product designers that we brought into the fold, that we could really capitalize on an improved user experience, and improved features within a bow sight.
Super cool. You touch on a bunch of stuff there. I mean, like, why do you think the outdoor industry, just in the way of content and marketing, is just so behind generally? Because I see that too, coming from the content and marketing side of things. They're just kind of slow to catch up. And if you can be a little disruptive, it's huge within this niche.
Exactly. I think it's multifold. I think a lot of outdoor industry companies, a lot of the times they're not as big as you would think they would be as far as budget. So I think like the first obstacle is, like going up to a mom and pop owned business and being like, hey, we need 10K to accomplish this project for you. They're going to run away for the hills and you're never going to see them again.
Yeah.
In a mainstream brand, like if you go to, the North Face or Red Bull or name your brand, if it's cool and if it's going to, move the needle for them and get them on the spotlight, they'll spend whatever it takes to accomplish that project. And there's ceilings to the stuff. But I think the first one is budget. I think the second one is just looking past what's trending now is a really difficult thing to do, to like go into other industries and see what's working. And the outdoor industry, I think they're so honed in on the way that things have been that they lose foresight to be able to look into the future.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think also, to add to that, they're caught in their own echo chambers of their passions and interests, and also kind of what is happening within the industry with their competitors, that they aren't thinking to look outside maybe for marketing inspiration, innovation. I think a lot of the stuff that I do, a lot of the time, I won't even look at what is happening within that particular industry. I will go to another industry entirely and see what they're doing different, how they're using fonts, how they're editing their content and pushing stuff out, and then think like, that's interesting. Like, that brushstroke looks really cool. I haven't seen anything like that over here. I can't remember. So totally.
Yeah, and I think there's just there's brands within the space that are crushing it and doing a really, really good job right now. I think the role of like a creative director in the outdoor industry has maybe been skewed. It's going to be like maybe somebody who's been in marketing or somebody who's picked up a camera before, but they don't understand, like, yes, you can do a killer photo shoot and get great assets. How are you going to use that? Like, what is that going to pair with the brand package? That's where it gets lost, because you could put an awesome package of content together. If you don't know how to get that across the finish line and show that to the end consumer and give the end consumer value, not just sell, you're going to fumble every single time.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people confuse what a creative director does or does not even know what a creative director does particularly. Our job, CDs, is to create brand continuity across all touch points. So it's having that 30,000 foot view and not only looking at one photo shoot, but how does that one photo shoot play into 20 other photo shoots plus video shoots plus web and graphic assets? How do those all feel? What are we trying to say?
Yeah.
Right? Does it all feel the same in a good way? Right? Like, I think a big part of creative direction is continuity, and being able to effectively communicate also that vision to people who don't understand. I do agree with you in the outdoor industry. I think people are being hired or putting titles as creative directors who are not creative directors. They're content creators. So they're photographers, they're videographers, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with those professions.
Not at all.
I've done all of those professions. You've done all of those professions. It's more than that, though. It is strategy. Is really what it is at a very high level. And then that's not even getting into marketing, and it really going hand in hand. I would say that it's a part of marketing, but creative direction is not marketing strategy either. I don't want to take up this whole podcast talking about.
Man, we could get into it. We could get into it big time.
I'll save it for the other thing. But but back to Dialed. All these people who are listening, like on the hunting side, they're like, "What? I came here to talk about bow sights, dude. Like, I want to hear about archery."
Exactly.
So I would say what you guys do really well is bow cosplay is what I like to call it. I think the hunting industry loves cosplay. I think any niche you're into, whoever purchases it loves to cosplay their stuff. And what I mean by that is they pretty much will like, man, I got the Sitka kit and I need to have all Sitka, like the full kit and not mix and match. And my bow, it needs to be all dialed, my Matthews bow with all my stuff on it. And I'm just plugging everything for SEO right now.
Yeah, get those clicks. Put that in the bio.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things you did and are doing very well. Can you touch on that a little bit of like what the impetus of that was and kind of what you guys are doing and where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, it just started with we're just playing with our strengths. Like, we have a really good looking product right now, and people love to see shiny product. And it's a way to, again, give value. Like, the last thing we want to do is just constantly sell and shove it down your throat, because that's what every other brand has done. Like, you flip open like an old school print magazine ad right now, and I just looked at one the other day. It's like 95% of them are just hard sell. And it just kind of feels gross once you understand like the reasoning behind it. So like, I'm going to shoot these, beautiful studio images or, these shots outside focused on that product, just to be like, hey, this is something that you can have. And it's kind of like the play of, if you have a dialed archery sight, I want you to be super stoked that you have it. Like, I'm so grateful for everybody that is. And I want to allow you to like, hey, this is a thing that we make, brag about it. Like, you spent your hard-earned money on our product. I want you to be super proud of that. So a lot of the content that we put out is focused on like, hey, this is a community of people who are like-minded and like care about this stuff.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit about kind of some of the collabs you guys do and some of the with the dials and what you guys do there.
Exactly. So kind of riffing off of our design, our product design, and shout out to TJ Eads, who is our industrial designer. He crushes it. Everything he touches is just on the money, looks so good. But we developed what we call the small batch. And what the small batch is, it's a limited run of both our void dials and full sights, depending on the drop. We'll open it up for a 4-day window. You have 4 days to order, and then, we ship after that. But we're going after kind of like-minded partners with that. So recently we partnered with Mossy Oak and we did a bottomland drop, which is something that like bottomland is so iconic and it's such a cool pattern. So we're very fortunate to be able to partner up with Mossy Oak and do that. There's been other ones. Knights of the Apex, we did a really cool dial design, kind of like the Blackbeard pirate with topography. And we've done quite a few of those now, and we're definitely ramping up to do more. But it's just kind of one more touch point for our consumer to, make this, even though it's only one component of a bow, give you the opportunity to really make it yours, make it unique, which is something that's completely new in this side of our space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see behind me, I got my dialed sight right there, and I chose orange. But like, you guys have
Yep.
duck camo that you guys have come out with, or is it out? I think, did I miss the drop on the duck?
Yeah, we did the duck camo drop. Oh, I'm gonna get dates messed up. Last fall we did. We're working on some stuff too that you can definitely. We're always what we learned in the beginning of Dialed. We want to be transparent and open with our consumer base because nobody look at Montana Knife Company, for instance, just as an
Sure.
example. They're super not overly transparent, but like, hey, here's what we're doing. We're selling out every single time. I want our consumer to like get a look inside of this company because it's everybody that supports us deserves that look. But going back to it right away, we learned that like maybe you can be a little overly transparent and like leak an image of something that we think is going to be easy to produce. And then we go back to like our finishing shop and they're like, that's going to take a little while. So there's like an additional round of like, hey guys, this is what we want to do, and I'll render it in Photoshop or something. Can you run a few tests first before we like go leak this to thousands of people?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation. Like, what have you learned, obviously coming from production and then starting an archery site business? Like, what are the business learnings that you guys have learned in there? It sounds like that was like a lesson in and of itself, right?
Hard good products is completely different than media production. There's similarities too, but like with media production, it's like and you've heard this 1,000 times, like, oh, we'll just fix it in post. Like if something goes sideways,
I hate it.
I hate it too. But there is that band-aid that you can put on. But with physical product, it's like, hey, we can have all this stuff looking really good, digitally mocked up. But then it's like, hey, how does, Cerakote apply to that? Like, how does this pattern, print on this product? Oh, and then by the way, you better make sure that you have the parts to assemble that and get it out the door. So there's like a couple more steps involved with getting a complete product. And we've kind of worked a lot or most of the kinks out. There's always going to be something that surprises you, but it's just kind of that foresight, like get way out in front of it, instead of 4 weeks, let's plan 12 weeks so that we make sure that all this stuff from a marketing effort front and from a physical production front that we're able to accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Just understanding essentially what your what I like to call in the industry what your Christmases are. They're coming no matter what. Christmas is going to show up every year. So
Exactly.
what can you get in front of and what can you do, right?
Yep. Exactly.
I think one of the things that you talked about is transparency at a company level. Why do you think that's important?
Our site is not for everyone. It's very expensive. It's on the top end of what you can spend. We feel that it is absolutely worth that. And because of that, I want anyone who kind of joins our community, spends their hard-earned money, to feel like they are a part of a team, because they are. Every time, I mean, starting this from ground up, it makes you appreciate every single person that you see tag us on social, or everybody that comes up to you and shakes your hand. Like we genuinely want you to feel a part of this thing because it's built by everyone who is supporting us. And there's a lot of companies out there who just kind of sweep that under the rug and, cash your check. And that's not us by any stretch.
And you guys have been kind of, I don't know what else to say, put your money where your mouth is technically, in that, you guys have been at all the TAC events. I've been noticing you guys kind of got your world tour going on, world tour, country tour, TAC tour.
Yep.
It's been really cool to see you guys kind of getting on the ground and meeting with people and hosting events and growing that community and really engaging and giving back to the community. Because you're right, there are a lot of brands out there, I won't name names, who are just kind of like, yeah, okay, you're kind of like you're too cool to sit with us a little bit, and they'll just continue to release pictures and images of some guy on an epic landscape looking super heroic on a sheep hunt, and that's it.
Yeah. I think landscape wise, commerce landscape wise, the last 10 years have been the Wild West for direct to consumer. And it's before social, before e-com really got kicked off, there wasn't that touch point for brands to truly communicate with, people who support them. So I think we really are. I mean, it's come a long ways in the last 10 years even, but there's still room for improvement for brands to like, hey, these people can make or break you if you're an e-com company, like have your stuff buttoned up on the product front so you don't have to worry about that. Like build the best thing that you can and then support the people who support you. It's really not that. It's a lot easier to just like spout that off and say it than it is to go through the effort of, Taylor runs our social and he gets hundreds of DMs that he himself, as the owner, is still taking pride in like responding to all of these people. And it's all those touch points. It's putting out content that people can relate with. It's answering those messages. It's, keeping your finger on the pulse of how people are feeling and supporting them when they've gone so far to support you.
Beautifully said, man. Any fun stories from the road so far?
Oh, there's always something. I mean, yeah, nothing crazy. I think what has been cool with Dialed to see the growth is we've had this vision of where we want to get to from the beginning. And we're finally able to we've transitioned from startup to like, okay, this is a legitimate business now. We can't like be back on our heels and, oh, we're just a startup kind of a thing. So even thinking ahead of planning out some of those, stories from the road. We've got a couple cool tags this year that we're going to be able to hunt. Wyoming for elk is one of them.
Heck yeah.
And yeah, just already kind of thinking like, all right, there's going to be some pretty cool stuff that, like I said in the beginning, this is our brand. And we've done a lot of this stuff for other clients in the past on the marketing front. And now it's kind of the ball's in our hands.
You got an extra seat, Jordan? Exciting.
Sure. I'll hand you a camera.
Well, I haven't touched one of those in a while.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Wyoming's kind of an interesting place. One of the guests I had on, the first one was Jess Johnson. And yeah, dude, I love Jess. She's so great. Shout out to Jess. If you haven't heard that podcast and you were interested in the state of Wyoming, hunting Wyoming and conservation, I would implore you to check it out because she kind of touches on every little thing that's going on right now, especially with wolves, like what happened with that wolf in Daniel, Wyoming with that guy, which we don't need to touch on. But what got me thinking about that is you guys are doing an elk hunt. You guys got some elk tags, right? You said in Wyoming?
Yep.
Their population right now is gangbusters for elk. And we touched on that, because normally the concern is like underpopulation, right? They have like a surplus of elk, essentially.
I like those kind of problems.
Yeah. And most of them, the problem is most of them are in these sanctuary zones, right? They're cut off from private land, which I thought, what I mean is they are not cut off from private land, but access to them is cut off by private land from some very exclusive ranches. And, elk need that. They need those places where they're able to go and they're able to winter, able to thrive. But they're doing a little too well up there. So I think they're trying to find some stuff. Are you guys kind of chasing them? Can you give me any hints? Are you guys going after anything like that? Or
to be honest, I just found out like last week. It's my dad actually has the tag, so I'll be going with him.
Awesome.
And I should know this. I don't even know like where it's for or anything. So I just know that there's elk available.
It's good enough.
Yep.
Who's your guys' site for? You said it's a very expensive price point. There's a lot of categories in archery. There's a lot of different types of hunting. There's tree stand hunting. There's Western big game. There's competitive shooting. Who should have an Arxos site?
The Arxos is for everyone who is serious about shooting their bow, who appreciates design and getting into like the specific features, people who want to maximize their effective range. One of the things that we actually have patented is our angled elevation system. Most mover bow sites, when you look at it, it's, straight up and down rail. You roll the wheel, it goes up and it goes down. Ours is tilted forward. So what that does as you roll your dial down to go to a farther distance, it slightly brings the housing and the pin closer to your face. What that does is raise your elevation point. So as you're rolling down, to a longer yardage, you're gaining yardage because that's getting slightly closer to your face. Same thing with, standard dovetail. If you shoot it all the way out versus shooting it all the way in, your impact point will change. So we just decided to do that, without having to even move your dovetail.
Super cool. And so that helps with vein clearance, right?
Helps with vein clearance. Yeah, exactly. We've had guys gain. I think it was last year in Michigan TAC. This guy's setup was kind of extreme, but he was able to clear with his top pin like 150 yards, I think, because of our AES system. And he was shooting, like knitting needles for arrows, like just super light. But most people will gain, anywhere between 20 to 50 yards off of our sight versus a competitor's.
Talk a little bit about that, for those who are uninitiated in bow hunting. How does size matter is what I'm trying to ask you, Jordan.
Yes, it does. No, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I'm a bow hunter. I don't shoot competition. I like to have one setup, and I just want to run that setup. So I want to maximize what I can get out of that one setup instead of having, my elk arrow, my antelope arrow, my whitetail arrow. I have one setup for everything. So what that can do, like, I'm shooting I think it's a right around 500 grain arrow setup. I have a 28-inch draw, and I'm shooting 65 pounds. So, like, not the most stout setup, but also not the most, low setup, I guess you could say. So, like, what that does for me, it allows me to shoot just a little bit heavier arrow than I normally, and still gain max effective range and vein clearance under that. So, like, where our system really shines is, one of the areas at least, is if, a lot of women, like a typical woman's draw length is going to be 25, 26 inches. All of the bows that are built these days are built on a 70 pound, 29-inch draw increment. That's where you're getting your target demo.
Made for me.
When you step down to a 26-inch draw at 40 or 50 pounds, that's really going to affect, your max effective range just based on, draw length alone. So with our sight, if you're shooting a lower setup like that, you're really able to maximize with that angled rail on, getting that 50, 60, 70 yard pin, whereas before you might max out at, 40 to 50 yards, depending on your setup. Yeah. And it's a moving scale. Like, what we're finding is there's not like hey, if you shoot this and this pounds with this arrow, like, there's so many variables with archery that it's tough to standardize. But overall, like, with all the data that we've collected, it's pretty cool to see what people are able to do with vein clearance. And not that we didn't design this so you could say that you go out and shoot a whitetail at 120 yards. There's guys that can do that. Shout out to Levi Morgan, Cam Haynes, whoever those guys are that can do that. That's not me. When I'm trying to shoot a deer, I want that thing as close. Like, I would rather take an 8-yard shot than a 50-yard shot. But if you're out west and you want to maximize what you're able to do, or if you're at a TAC event and want to be able to reach out and touch that 105-yard target, there's options there.
Killer. So, you're out in the Midwest. On the West Coast, what I think is really interesting is there's a lot of guys who are, probably, I'll give a sliding range of like 26 years old to 43. And they grew up, surfing, they grew up skating, they grew up in cities. They generally did not grow up with hunting. Pretty much I'm describing myself. And, and I've gone on this journey, right, where now I would say that I'm a hunter, right? Particularly, like, I don't think I'm not a whitetail hunter, but I would say more big game was what I do just geographically. But there's a lot of people who want to get into it, and they have that background and they don't really know where to start. And particularly, I would say most of them are attracted to bow hunting, either out of the purity, because the ethos is more around food sourcing than it is about just stacking big bucks.
Mm-hmm.
How would you suggest that they start?
Man, like, right now, I would say is kind of like this resurgence of a golden age of archery and hunting. There are so many resources out there to even just dig into before you even buy a bow or get set up with hunting clothes or anything like that. I think going back, like, if it's something that interests you, there's so many resources available right now that haven't been available in the past. So if you want to get into archery, it is intimidating. Like walking into that bow shop for the first time, knowing nothing, is super, super, super intimidating. But there's tools that you can even use before you step in there to be like, hey, I eventually, like, shooting an elk is something that I really want to do. Okay, so let's set up everything you need to work for that. Maybe it's like a 2-year ramp up for, getting ready for that first big game hunt. Cool. Okay, so let's start at step 1. You want to shoot it with the bow. Perfect. Don't go buy $2,000 worth of archery equipment. Go to your local bow shop. I'd recommend, I was going to say go to eBay, but go to your local bow shop or somebody that's reputable, not,
Support.
don't meet Earl from Craigslist in a Walmart parking lot and grab the bow out of his trunk. Maybe dial it in just a little bit more than that. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because there are so many cool people getting into hunting right now that never would have, like you were saying, like right now it's the dude who wears Vans Classics and a flat brim hat and, likes to surf, that is also going to pick up a bow. There's so many dudes out there like that. So there's something for everybody. You can go from that guy all the way to, somebody that's hunted their whole life down in Georgia or South Carolina. There's like this huge spectrum. So, and there's like the resources out there, like YouTube University, right? Like you can learn everything you'd need to. There's also one of the companies that I work with is called Spartan Forge. It's a mapping service, but built into that, they're developing an AI system, sort of like what ChatGPT would be if ChatGPT could spit you very specific hunting information. So you can go in, ask like, hey, I'm new to bow hunting, looking for a new setup. This is what I'm looking to hunt. And it'll spit you out either broad or specific answers depending on how you ask your question, and at least get you pointed into the right direction of, hey, look at these things. Because it is like, if I went down to a jiu-jitsu studio, I would feel so out of my element because I've never done that before. So that'd be the most intimidating thing I can imagine. So try to mitigate that by just teaching yourself a little bit so you can have some grasp of understanding of what's kind of coming for you. If you're
saying that next time you're in town, you're going to come to the jiu-jitsu studio?
I'm just going to run laps around it.
Shout out to Originals Jiu-Jitsu. I'm actually going to train there later today.
There you go.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And also just the reason why, outside of just supporting small businesses and bow shops, is going to a bow shop, in my opinion, you're working with a bow tech. They have their experience and their advice. They're going to be able to cater that bow and set up that bow for you. You're going to be able to test shoot that bow and make sure, most bow shops have some sort of place to shoot. To get your peep sight right, they're really going to dial everything in. And then the second part I would say is they're going to create an experience for you in where they can lay the groundwork for that community, right? Because they want nothing more than to grow the sport and to grow that community. And so they're going to be stoked when you come in and you get your first bow, and they're going to want to get you hooked. So they're going to start to tap you in, and they will also understand cool resources that are available for you depending on what you got going on. So like, for instance, I'm a member of the Orenco Archery Club out here in California. And I would have never have discovered that if I had not met my buddy Kyle, who was also a member, and was like, hey man, you should really check this out. And what it is also, Jordan, you come down, I gotta take you out. It's a 57-acre compound in the valley, and you can shoot a course like you're doing a round of golf. Imagine just being able to go do tack kind of whenever you want. And it's great. It helps to dial you in and keep you fresh. And it's super cool. So I think just, to add on that, going out to that local bow shop is going to just give you all these other, an experience that you might not have had.
Yeah. And that's so much fun too. We just shot a 3D course last weekend. It took 1.5 hours, 2 hours with 5 of us. And it's so much fun. They're like, especially in a group like that, there's no pressure. Just have fun, get out there. It's golf for people who don't want to wear like funny hats and pants.
I'm going to start doing that. I'm just going to go to I'm going to go to 3D competitions, just wearing polos and like tucked in khakis.
Yeah, no, it is fun though. And like I'm not a golfer by any stretch. I've golfed like once in my life and it was ugly, but it's fun getting to shoot 3D targets and just the conversations that can be had. Like we were talking about hunting plans the whole time we were out there. We were talking about different bow setups and arrow setups it's fun. It's really fun.
Just finding your tribe, right? I think that's something
Yep.
that you pointed on, is how important it is to have your tribe and finding those like-minded fellows, because they're going to support you and they're going to help grow whatever it is that you're doing, and they're going to be stoked to talk about that
Yep.
thing. I mean, I love my wife, we're best friends, but I can't really talk her ear off about arrow grain weight and
Yeah.
whether I should run titanium inserts. So it's
She doesn't care what your FOC is.
That always upsets me. I always try and bring up my FOC to her, and she just never acknowledges it.
She never gets it. Imagine that.
Can you explain FOC to anybody who doesn't understand what FOC is?
It's front of center. I'm not a bow tech. Thank God I'm better with the camera than I am with the bow. But it's like how your weight is situated within your arrow, and how many grains of additional weight you have in addition to the shaft of your arrow.
And bigger percentage good, lower percentage bad.
Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's all about where you hit the thing you're shooting at. I think a lot of people like really like to overcomplicate things. At the end of the day, you just need to be able to shoot what and where you need to shoot.
I've heard a lot of guys who have said to me that, they got a hunt coming up and they mess with their bow setup so much that then they just don't trust it when they get out there. And I mean, what do you think about that? I think you kind of touched on that before. I'm just cool. Like if I'm getting good groupings and it's working out, like let's not mess with it. Let's not try and make it better.
That's exactly where I'm at. I mean, the one thing that I do a lot, just because I do own Dialed and we're constantly putting out new colors and stuff, is I've sighted in probably like, I don't know, half a dozen of those sites in the last year. You get good at it the more you do it. But everything else other than the sight, I set it and forget it. I'm not changing out arrows. Once I find a broadhead that flies great, that's what stays on there. Not a lot of change, especially during hunting season. I won't touch anything. So,
are you a mechanical guy or a fixed broadhead kind of guy? What's your flavor?
I like mechanicals for whitetail. If you can, I mean, they fly super well and they just do a lot of damage to whitetails. If I was going to go out west and hunt elk, I would definitely switch to a fixed blade, but I like mechanicals for whitetail.
Has it ever failed on you? I think that's a big fear, right? Is that it's like gonna fail.
The only time a mechanical has ever failed is when I put a shot where I shouldn't have. If you hit the shoulder, if you hit bone, they're just not going to do it for you. But if you put it where it's supposed to go, that thing isn't going to be on its feet for very long. So,
yeah, I think that's a good thing to touch on, especially for those newer hunters. There's so much more to hunting than just shooting the animal. I think for people who are uninitiated, they tend to not even they only tend to think about the shooting portion of it, and they don't tend to think about all the other steps that go into it. I mean, can you describe some of that? What is it like? Like, okay, so you shoot a whitetail, right?
Yep.
Then what?
Yeah. Depending on where you hit it is going to be where your emotions live. Thankfully, most of the deer that I've shot, it's been very good, very successful. But it's an old saying. I can hear like my dad and my grandpa in the back of my head when I say this, but if you bow hunt long enough, there will be a time where you don't put that perfect shot on. That's when the emotions really start. If you know that you just absolutely pinwheel the thing, you either hear it crash, watch it crash, whatever, it's the best feeling in the world. It's emotional. You're excited. There's, maybe a little bit of reverence. All that work that you did, that you put in over the summer, spring, whatever, finally, like that was your moment to do your thing. When you put a bad shot on an animal, there's no worse feeling in the world. Anybody who has done that will tell you the same thing. Like, yeah. I just did it this past fall. I hit a little bit back, had to back out, waited overnight, found it the next day. But that, you just don't sleep. You're constantly thinking about we're talking margins of, 6 inches sometimes, where
Yeah.
it's just, yes, like the vitals, especially on a whitetail, they're good size, but a lot can go wrong. And if you hit a little bit far back, that's the difference between a 60-yard track and hundreds of yards and a sleepless night and just a nauseous feeling until you put your hands on that animal finally. So yeah, it does get really emotional, both good and bad. And those negative emotions are what fuel you to do it better next time. Kind of give that animal the swift, death that it deserves if we are pursuing them this way.
And I think with bow hunting, there's so many variables that are kind of out of your control a little bit
Yeah.
once you let that arrow fly too. Like wind is just one of them, depending on the yardage. That can make that 6-inch difference. If you're
Easy.
where you're at, if it's feeling calm, but maybe where that whitetail is in this case, the wind's blowing at a 5-mile-an-hour wind,
Yeah, exactly. And especially that's where distance comes in too. If it's within 30 yards, you're probably fine. But if you are, especially on elk, I know that there's a lot of guys, and like an elk is obviously a bigger target. So you should you should feel more confident at 60 yards on an elk than you do at a whitetail. There's a lot of arrow flight in a 60 to 80 yard shot, where that thing can be in a completely different position by the time that the arrow gets there, especially during the rut. For both whitetail and elk, their brain is not on being calm. Their brain is on everything else that's around them, trying to accomplish what they need to accomplish during that time of the year. And that's exactly like the buck that I killed last year. That's exactly what happened there. He came in chasing does. I drew back and was completely in the zone. I forgot to stop him, and he was chasing doe. So by the time my arrow cleared that 25 yards, he had taken one big step and turned away from me, and just that fast went from, hey, he's down right there in the field, to, okay, this is going to be a long one.
Yeah, it's gnarly. I can say that just even on my bull rifle hunt last year, I took a 400-yard shot. The wind was blowing a little bit. It was just back by 4 inches and made the difference between a shot through the heart to through the lungs. And it was still a hit to the vitals, but it was also, you didn't go down right away. It took another one. And it took another one, me getting a lot closer. And nothing's kind of, like you said, there's no worse feeling than making an animal suffer unnecessarily. I think a lot of people on the outside, they think like hunters really don't care about animals. I think we care the most about animals.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and that's what shows it too. I think if you ever lose that emotion, you probably need to hit pause and like reassess what's going on. Like I think there is I've killed enough deer now where if I put a perfect shot on it, like I'm stoked. I don't really, I don't get that sad or that upset. I've done it enough, and I've understood what I am doing for a long enough time where it's just kind of automatic. But I still get sent to like the depths of hell when I put a bad shot on an animal. And it's a good gut check, like I want to make sure that I have that emotion to fuel me to do better next time, and to like really like this is maybe over dramatic, but like you're taking a life, like that thing wouldn't die right then and there if you didn't shoot it. But you do the animal justice and put in that time and effort before, so that you have a positive result on your end.
Yeah, I think, when I spoke to Jess, one of the things that she said is this moment where both of you are kind of enter this environment. You're in this environment, only one of you walks out,
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds very like a Mad Max Thunderdome, like 2-man enter, 1-man leave, but it's
yeah, exactly. And that's where
I'm with you. I think it's just one of those things where you do get a little emotionally tempered, for sure. I remember the feeling with my first mule deer, of that being this very emotional experience. And then I remember with this bull, it's like you said, it was kind of like I knew what I was out there to do.
Yep.
We're here doing it.
Yep.
And that didn't mean that I didn't have I don't know if you want to call it reverence or appreciation for the protein, the fact that animal gave its life so that I could eat, which is really important. But it definitely wasn't the same dopamine release or like come down or adrenaline dump I think
Yeah.
the buck fever that everybody calls it at first.
Yep. And I mean, man, I get giddy every time there's deer close to me, every time that happens. But it is like you do kind of, and maybe this is the wrong way to put it, but you do kind of like grow into that. You get used to the environment of doing that, especially, and again, not to minimize it, but like shooting a whitetail doe for me right now is very automatic. There's like very little like external thought, like this is what's going to happen. I've done it a lot. But then there are those circumstances where like a big buck will get my heart beating out of my chest every single time. There's kind of levels to it. Even on this is stepping out of bow hunting, but like on a species front, when I'm pheasant hunting with my dog, it's a completely different, like it's just me and my dog hanging out. Like there's, again, not to like disrespect other animals, but there's very little reverence when a rooster pops up out of the cattails and I shoot it. And, the dog brings it. It's just a different, that's just like, okay, cool.
I mean, I think what we're tiptoeing around, though, the fact is like humans are predators. We've been predators on the landscape for hundreds of thousands of years. Early hominids, we were predators. Protein and meat is what fueled our brain growth. I think that in today's society, there's almost like a shunting or a shying away from acknowledging that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that and understand that. It's okay if that's not the choice you want to make for yourself, but you do have to acknowledge we are hunters. Our bodies were built to hunt. Our brains were built to hunt.
Yep.
And that's why there's such this dopamine release when you put an animal down, when you then cook its meat, you share that with your community, your friends, you eat that. And then all of a sudden your brain's like, yeah, that was amazing. We should do that again. It wasn't like,
yeah,
it wasn't like, man, I'm not doing that anymore. It's like,
yeah,
you like open up this whole door where you're like, oh, this has been here the whole time. This is a thing. This is totally a thing. And I want to do that more. Your brain reinforces that behavior. That's why it catches on. Yeah. So I think, we should acknowledge that we are hunters. Our bodies were built to hunt. We do well on meat.
Yep.
And also let's just like, I think a good segue on this is you're not absolved of suffering just because, like, inflicting suffering just because you're a vegetarian or a vegan.
Yeah.
And this is spicy, but it's, anybody who grew up in rural America who understands the business of ranching or monocrop agriculture knows that slice of bread from that wheat that was harvested, or that corn that you're eating, or that product that contains that corn, has thousands upon thousands of insect and animal lives in it, just either by combines or property management to ensure that crop, or if you don't eat organic produce or whatever, like the spraying of glyphosate that's just killing off everything that's there. So I think what's really interesting is, a lot of people like to harp on hunters for taking one life, when really, if you're participating in today's modern age, every product you buy has thousands upon thousands of deaths. And it doesn't matter if it's meat or not. It's any crop.
Yeah. It also doesn't matter if it has like the organic sticker on it and like the nice craft paper and green ink, label on it. It's all a part of it.
So I think what's really important is being able to understand that and almost take a certain level of accountability for the suffering in which we inflict. At least that's how I think about it in my head, is I understand what I'm doing, and what's more ethical, me taking one life, like on an elk that'll feed my family for 6-7 months in protein, or going to the store and buying ground beef that's in a plastic wrap package that's an amalgamation of a few different cows that has been, has this gnarly carbon footprint, like shipped across the country a lot of the time, even like from, if you have lamb or other stuff, like New Zealand or Australia, and like it's just far worse. And nothing's wrong with that. I just want to say that nothing is wrong with doing that or going to the grocery store or buying protein. I'm just saying when you're getting into this tit for tat conversation that often happens, this is, you can't use that, at least in my eyes, as a justification to demoralize those who have the skill set and hunt.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if you don't, even if you're not a vegan or vegetarian, even if you don't want to hunt, you should understand the process that has to happen for that food to get to your door. Like if you're eating ground beef, like guess what? There was a cow that got a bolt through its head and, it was sent through a factory on a meat hook and sliced and drip. Like you should have a good understanding of what has to happen, so you can have your chicken sandwich on a Saturday afternoon. Like it's not, even if you're uncomfortable with, the animal dying, you should still consider like every step of the way that has to happen.
Well, it's not like I was saying before too, man, of course, but it's even if you're like, I'm not eating meat, right? Mm-hmm. Because it happens with, I'm trying to think of a food where it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
There's not some sort of death involved. I think if you're a human being and you want to stay alive and eat, there is some sort of death involved of another animal or insect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, man, your tofu is coming from like 1,000-acre bean field down the road here. And let me tell you what follows that, combine in the fall. Like the crows and seagulls aren't following that tractor because they want to eat soybeans. There's stuff happening in there, and there's a lot of death involved in that. So there's also a lot of whitetail that like to eat out of soybean fields. So it kind of works great for me that way.
Question: how much death do you think is in one Little Miss Debbie?
I don't know, man, but depending on the Little Debbie snack, it might be worth it sometimes. Enough of all these super healthy granola bars. Just get me a zebra cake, and a box of Little Debbie's. We're good to go for a little while.
I remember when we were in Georgia, I was making everybody else feel self-conscious because I was getting all these healthy snacks and organic stuff. And I think it was Hunter who came up to me. We were in a Walmart and we're fueling up, and Hunter goes, Is it okay if we get other stuff too? Is that all right? I'm like, yeah, Hunter, get whatever you want, man. That's just what I'm doing. Like,
yep,
you do your own thing, but like, it's interesting, I think that I think you should just do you, man. I think that I don't know what
that is what it is. Yeah, man. Like I think everybody should have an understanding of it. Like, hey, Little Debbie's aren't great for you. But I think especially too for the whitetail world, if you grew up whitetail hunting and in deer camps and stuff, a lot of that is just kind of not in the culture because that sounds a little too deep. But like, yeah, like grew up, if you're going to do an all day sit, you're going to sit in a tree from dark to dark. That Little Debbie snack at 11 a.m. might keep you in the tree just long enough to shoot the buck that cruises past you at 2 o'clock. It's kind of like it's like the Midwestern soul food.
Can I quote you on that? I'm going to. Yeah. Little Miss Debbie's, the Midwestern soul food.
Yeah. Gets us through.
There's a boat. What is that company? Bow Crew. They do the Little Miss Debbie's Hunting Club.
Yep. Big fan of that.
Explain what is the difference? What is the culture of whitetail hunting right now as it stands in the Midwest, and where is it going, do you think?
I mean, I think everybody who grew up deer hunting, I can speak for Minnesota, like deer camp was a big deal when I was growing up. My grandpa has land in northern Minnesota. My dad and I would drive up there for opening weekend and, rarely see a deer, but just that whole package and that experience meant so much. And I think because of kind of the glamorization of killing super big deer and, the evolution of food plots and all the implements that you need to, craft build your ground to be this perfect, as seen on TV style whitetail hunt. I feel like we maybe got away from that for a little bit, but it's coming back. I think deer camp is making a resurgence because like that time that you spend in there with those people isn't replicable replicable by anything else. We worked on some film projects together highlighting that. And man, even when it's a different family, like for me, it's like, it feels like I'm home. Like this is so familiar. It's such a kind of sacred thing to be a part of.
It's like hunting summer camp for adults.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's when you spend that much time with people that you care about, or maybe even people that you don't know, but it's in that environment, everybody's going to walk away with a super cool story. Like it's just such a, and again, like there's an access aspect to this too, where a lot of people didn't grow up with that. But man, like I think this community it's kind of rallying that. It's something that's really cool to introduce people to. Our buddy Taylor Chamberlain was on that shoot highlighting the Kevin Harlander's family's deer camp. And just to kind of see, like he didn't grow up with that either, but it was like this immediate, like this just feels good. It's super cool. And the focus isn't even on killing a big deer, or, like it's not necessarily even on taking hunting too seriously. It's about the camaraderie and the memories that you're building with it.
Amen, man. Totally. Yeah. I'm all for it. So, I mean, but like, if you're just starting out and you're whitetail hunting, anybody who's listening to this in the Midwest and who wants to get that access, how would you recommend that they go about it? I guess they got to get some friends, right?
You got to make some friends. The steps for that are probably on a different podcast. No, but man, I think it all goes back to just the community. Like if you have an archery shop that has a league, get involved. Like just meet the people. I wouldn't go inviting myself to their deer camp, right off the bat, but like make friends within the space that have common interest. And, like maybe it's as simple as you kind of create your own thing, like rent a camper and, pull it up to some public land and make that your deer camp, or, like you never know what could come out of things like that. But I think that's where it starts. It's just camaraderie, regardless of location, can lead to some cool things.
Where do you think the bow industry is heading particularly? At Dialed, you guys get to play with a lot of new latest and greatest in the way of bows and archery.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing it, like where it's been and where it's going to kind of end up?
I mean, I think we've all kind of seen it's kind of a mainstream thing now, with a lot of the media. That's like Joe Rogan alone has probably brought more people to bow hunting in the past 10 years than the industry itself has, in the 10 years prior to that, which there's challenges there too. I know people are very opinionated and you can get into the whole, like too many people on public land debate thing.
Sure.
But archery specifically, like it's such a fun thing to do. Even if you do it without the intention of hunting, it's worth getting into. You have to be super disciplined. Like there's a process to it. There's steps, there's, repetition that you have to build upon within it. And I think we're just going to kind of see that growth of the industry. I think there's a lot of brands like really pushing the art of possible. I think we've maybe technologically with compound bows, there's maybe like a little bit of a plateau, like kind of from, I don't know, 2010 to now. There was a lot that was done. It'll be interesting to see what the actual bow manufacturers are. I mean, I shoot this bow. It's a Matthews Lift behind me. And I'm like, man, I don't really have any critiques. Like it just shoots so well. I don't know what could be better, but I think because of the popularity of archery, you're going to see brands still push and try to innovate on top of that.
Yeah. I don't even understand how they're going to innovate. Honestly, Matthews bows, I mean, that V3X, like I shot that and I was like, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. I can't see it get much better, but I mean, it does, Yeah. And so I wonder if it's just bows will get lighter, maybe.
I can see
have
that.
The same level of tech, right? Like that's the only thing I can really think of, because right now, unless they come up with some way to remove more human error.
I need that big time. Yeah, no, I think, and like there's, even with the weight thing, like there's an element where you need and want a certain amount of weight so you can hold steady. I think there's definitely such thing as a bow that's too light, especially when you get back to distance. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those things. I'm just excited to be a part of it and, get to see what we're doing as Dialed to kind of push the art of possible. And then, every single bow manufacturer these days too are constantly coming up with new kind of cool innovations.
Speaking of innovations, you guys got anything in the hopper? What's next for Dialed? What's the future? Is Scooter going to make a comeback?
Yeah, going back to the first part of our conversation, the CD of this company and the marketing behind it needs to put a little bit better Scooter plan together, because he's been neglected for a couple of years. Scooter rocking. People are scratching their heads wondering what it is. It's our founder, Scott. It's kind of his alter ego. There's a couple videos on our YouTube channel of Scooter kind of just hanging loose. And even going back to our brand, like, we do that because we don't want to be the brand that takes ourselves too seriously. We want to take our product very seriously. We want to take that experience very seriously, but we don't want to come off as dry, and uptight at the same time. So there will be more of that. And also, man, we're growing. Like I said before too, like, we're kind of out of that startup phase and straight into just, okay, this is a legitimate business. We're not going anywhere. We actually just got initial designs. We're building a new HQ that we'll be moving into in early 25. It's going to double our space again. We just doubled our space in March. So it's it's happening, and it's happening fast, very intentionally, but pretty quick as well. So
what is some advice that you would have for anybody with an entrepreneurial spirit who wants to do something like you've done? What are some of the biggest lessons you guys have learned, just speaking on that growth?
The scariest step is the first one. Like, if you have an idea that you think holds water, and you think you've got a good handle on direction and how you can push it and how it is better or different than anything else on the market, go for it. I mean, obviously there's kind of the financial aspects that you can think about, but don't be afraid to take that initial step. Come with it prepared, and come with it with a full pot of coffee, because you've got to give it every ounce of your being to get it off the ground. And even once it's off the ground, you have to keep your head down. Like, we've been at this for over 3 years now, and we haven't paused to take a break once. I think you get used to kind of a base level of intensity, and we're doing things as a company to obviously mitigate a lot of the negative aspects that come along with that. But don't be afraid to take that leap, because it's worth it. It's worth it for sure. Also, get a good mentor who's not going to just tell you yes. Find somebody that will grab you by the ear and tell you if what you're doing is dumb or not, because it's better to learn that on the front end than to be into it and realize that what you're doing isn't working. That's pretty important too.
Good advice, man. Anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, I appreciate you having me on, and I'm stoked to be here, and stoked that you have one of those sights hanging over your shoulder.
Me too, man. Glad for your friendship, and stoked to see where you guys take this thing. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for everything, man.